What we want to know is whether the Conservative parties will deliver on that manifesto. That's the question. I did see George Pascoe Watson believes that the kind of view that you've just heard represented is the kind of thing that's going to happen. I just point out to George Pascoe Watson one single fact. When it comes to the House of Lords, this isn't a Liberal Democrat demand, it's in the Conservative Party manifesto. And what we want to know is whether the Conservative parties will deliver on that manifesto. That's the question. I did say George Pascoe Watson doesn't want to see that happen, but the Conservatives are committed to it. Now I'd like to see that delivered.
And do you think it will be delivered?
I've no reason to believe it wouldn't.
Chris Grayling?
Well, I mean, it's certainly on the agenda. I'm not involved in that department because I focus on welfare reform, but I've no reason to believe that it won't.
Would you like to see it happen?
Well, I mean, there is a mood for change. It was in our manifesto. It's in the Liberal Democrat manifesto. There's absolutely no reason why it should
This
happen.
wouldn't have to go to a referendum. This could be a decision of both houses of Parliament, of course.
Yes.
Yes. So you wouldn't have to rely on what the public thought.
And the House of Commons as well.
Given the way they voted on
The House of Commons
the
has voted this a number of times before as well.
It's in the two parties' manifestos.
Yes.
Okay, so
Actually, it's in our party's manifesto as well. So
I'll bet you,
there's
I bet you you're an egg on when it comes to it.
I bet you we won't.
I
bet you we
okay.
won't.
You and I have a
you
little,
know,
you and I have a little side bet at some stage, and we can sort out what it is.
I will bet you that Miliband will lead Labour to support House of Lords.
I'll give you an undertaking now. I'll give you an
If you
undertaking
stand
now.
united, we'll deliver it.
I give you an undertaking now because I've already heard them. I've already heard the Labour war horses in the House of Lords opposing this. When you come to the House of Lords to carry that through, it'll be your party's representatives and the backwoods ones of the Conservatives who will fight against it.
Why do you say that? Why do you think they
Heard the
do that?
voices.
Why do you think they want to oppose it?
I've heard them already doing so. We've had several debates in the House of Lords, and exactly the same people, the George Fowles and so on, who have argued against a reform to the voting system, are already arguing
never
with
been in our
conservative
manifesto before.
well, let's wait and
It's
see
never
what
been in
happens.
our
Okay,
manifesto before.
you and I will sort out what the bet is afterwards.
Can I
I'll
just
bet
make
you
that
I-
one
Laura Kingsbury.
The critical thing in this is that if the Labour war horses, as Paddy Ashton describes them, decide to fight against this, it will be largely to make life difficult for the Liberal Democrats. Now, the critical thing here is, yes, it was in the Conservative and the Liberal Democrat manifesto. There is a coalition commitment to do this. The difference is Nick Clegg and his party want to do it and be able to deliver it soon. David Cameron is known to consider this. I think the phrase he once used as something of a third-term issue. So the question is, will this be something the coalition moves on soon, that they are able to show progress on in the next couple of years before we start getting towards the next general election?
I think it's a
That's
very
the question.
important
It's
point.
the timing.
It's
And it's
very
about who
important
gets
question.
their way. And this is Nick Clegg's agenda. He's meant to be leading the constitutional change. And there are plenty of people in the Conservative Party who will say privately, this is never going to happen.
If you don't do it in the next session, in other words, start this year, you won't deliver it because you get towards the end of Parliament. I've been there before. You can't deliver it. Can I just say one other brief thing about Ed Miliband, who was attacked by my mates George and Kevin? He has got the biggest performance in England. We got 37%. We out-polled the Tories and we trounced the Liberal Democrats. Wales, we've got government in Wales, the best performance ever. Scotland's a special case. Now, from a position where we were down and out a year ago, I think that's pretty good. But we're still building, and we've got a long way to go, as Ed has been the first to say.
Rick, I just want to bring us up to date on what's going on the AV referendum. You'll see across the bottom of the screen the yes and the no vote. The no running at just over 7 million, the yes at just over 3 million, and the target of 9.873 million. But there have been one or two places, 3 or 4, 5 or 6 now, who voted the other way. Islington was one. Islington in London voted 57% yes. If we can show that, can we? There we are. Islington, 57% yes, 43% no. Islington much derided as the home of the liberal intellectual elite in this country, and Yorkshire and Humber not derided in that way. 0-0, that's a jolly good screen, I like that one. Haringey in London. Another London, and remember in London, this was the only vote available yesterday. You could only go and vote on the referendum. Maybe that influenced this a bit. The yes vote 57%, the no vote 43% in Haringey. Lambeth in London, Lambeth 55% yes and 45% no. And Cambridge, and no doubt people will speculate on why this university city voted this way. Yes, 54%, no, 46%. In an odd way, it does seem that all the places that have done this, or most of them, have been places which, well, the London ones anyway, which didn't have anything else to make up their minds about. I don't know. Glasgow Kelvin was another one. 59% yes, 41% no. I don't know how many areas we have, regions that have gone that way. Anyway, it's not going to affect the result. We're heading at 7.4 million now, 7.48 million. So the no vote is heading for a decisive victory.
2.57. Looks as though it's coming back towards 2-1 rather than 3-1. Maybe I'm reading that wrong, but that's what it looks like. It's not a yes, that's for sure.
Yes. Now, let's go down to the centre where all this is being counted more or less efficiently, and sometimes with the microphones on and sometimes with them off, and join Jo Coburn and hope that her microphone's on. Jo.
Yes, it is on. We've been listening to you and the programme output. Well, at the moment, of course, it looks as if it's going to continue all the way through to an emphatic no. Well, joining me here, Chris Hume, the Energy and Climate Change Secretary, and the Labour peer, John Reid. Chris Hume, you pretty well conceded it was over before the counting had even begun.
Well, I thought it was very clear from my sense of how things have gone on the ground in my own patch in Eastleigh in Hampshire. And, you know, the people have spoken and we accept their verdict. It's very, very clear. I think what we have had for the first time ever is a referendum on how we elect our MPs. I think that was a very useful exercise.
Useful, but you lost it completely.
Well, we lost it, but, you know, as I say, people have said very clearly we should not use the alternative vote for the House of Commons, and we accept that verdict. But I think it is right that people should have the final say on how their MPs are elected. We've never actually had a referendum on that issue before.
So it was important to have the referendum, John Reid, even though you, of course, have been part of a no campaign that Chris Hume says has been pretty disreputable in its personal attacks on Nick Clegg.
Well, I think very few people actually wanted a referendum, but now that it's taken place, if this is the result, it is a stunning result and a resounding rejection. And I hope that it is true that all politicians do accept the overwhelming vote to retain first past the post and don't try and find some back door to bring in some other form of electoral reform.
Not going to be a back door, no the House of Lords trying to bring in any sort of electoral reform?
No, absolutely not. Remember that this is a vote on the alternative vote for the House of Commons. And, you know, John would like to say that, widen that out and say that actually it's a vote not to feed chimpanzees in the London Zoo, bananas or whatever.
Is that what you're
saying? It isn't. It is actually a vote about exactly what it says on the tin, which is, should we have the alternative vote for the House of Commons? And the rejection was overwhelming,
No, it's more than
and we accept that.
What are you saying? That they're going to try to
It is
proportional
a positive
representation?
vote to retain first past the post in the governance of Britain, and all other electoral reform should now be put aside. The people should be listened to and get on with dealing with unemployment, welfare, and the big issues in which they're interested. They really didn't want this in the first place. Now they've rejected it. It would be a real snub, Chris, if somebody started to find some other way to bring in some other form of electoral reform. This is a positive vote for first past the post.
Well, I think it's very interesting that you're now saying that, John, because I looked very recently on the UK political betting website, various other websites, where the No campaign had taken on adverts saying, vote no to AV for real proportional representation. And lots of people on your side, including your colleague in the House of Lords, David Owen, was arguing, reject the alternative vote because it will stop a move to real reform. And now you're trying to argue exactly the opposite.
Well,
I think you have to make up your mind
John,
on this.
we've had these arguments. What about the coalition, Chris Hume? I mean, the harsh words, spat inside cabinet. What are you going to do now?
Well, I don't know how you think that there was a spat inside cabinet. As far as I'm concerned, cabinet remains a private meeting, and we have discussions about what is going on in
between all of us, it was reported that there were tempers frayed.
The reality is that we have a coalition agreement. We will deal with that coalition agreement and deliver it.
What about the relationship inside cabinet? How are you going to sit with your cabinet
I
colleagues?
think there is no doubt that relationships have been frayed by this campaign, that we've had the injection into this campaign of certain precedents, including the sort of things that the Republican right has specialised in and made up facts, as John's colleague David
You're still smarting from
admitted.
that campaign.
Well, I don't want to see British politics get to a situation where we have very robust arguments, in a free country but with different opinions. We should not have a position where we're making up facts.
And governments work, don't they, John Reid, even where there is a difference of opinion? I mean, there couldn't have been clearer
John always
differences of opinion with Gordon Brown and Tony Blair.
No, of course there are differences inside it, but it's got to the extent when there are such serious differences that you feel the need to attack your colleagues who are inside the cabinet when you're outside it. In other words, if you want to play in the field and shout abuse from the sidelines, then the honourable thing to do in these occasions is go. When I couldn't agree entirely with Gordon Brown when he came in as Prime Minister, I went the day he came in. And then I stayed quiet outside. I think that's what people expect you to do. It's not for me to tell anybody what to do, and there will be differences within every cabinet. There's no question about that. Sometimes, quite serious ones. But if there are profound differences, leave it. Don't demand the right and privilege of being in the cabinet and the right to be outside it.
I think that's the difference between a single-party cabinet and a coalition. In a coalition, we have a coalition agreement, and it's inevitable that we are going to try and deliver on that. We're determined that we will keep our side of the bargain, and we expect, of course, our Conservative partners to keep their side of the bargain.
A complete change of style. No more rose gardens. No more sunny days together.
I don't know what, in terms of the change of style, you might think of, but it's certainly the case that we need a business-like relationship where we are delivering on what was the key thing, which is clearing up the mess that John and his colleagues in the Labour Party left us, where we were spending 113 pence for every pound that was coming in, and somebody had to clean up that mess, and that is the overwhelming national interest, which we've come together with the Conservative Party to deliver on, so that we can get a recovery going, and get unemployment coming down, and get us out of the danger
And you
zone.
have to stay there, don't you? Because there's no other alternative, because of the figures we've just had all day through the local elections and national elections. You can't afford to.
We are a party which clearly is determined to deliver on our promises, and the promises are there in the coalition agreement. We've made that commitment, and we intend to deliver on it.
Well, far be it for me to give advice, but if I would advice to the Liberals, it would be, my God, if you walk out now, you're walking into oblivion. And I think one of the results of this is that the Liberal half of the coalition has been greatly weakened. I don't think that was the intention of anybody who was voting in the AB, but I think that they chose the referendum, they wanted the referendum, they chose the date, they chose the question, and there has been such an overwhelming rejection of it. It should put electoral reform off the agenda and everyone, including the government, back to the major issues.
Well, John Reid, Chris Huhne, thank you very much for joining me. We'll just take a quick look at the board behind as well. Surprise, surprise, the Noes are still ahead.
Thanks very much. The Noes are on 8,299,796 as I speak, and they've got to get to something like 9,873,000 according to our figures. Well, we'll stay here until they do cross that winning post, first past the post. Let's have the news from Sophie Long.
David, thank you. The BBC is forecasting that the voters of the UK have decisively rejected any change to the way they elect members of Parliament to the House of Commons and have rejected the introduction of the alternative vote. The official result should come within the next couple of hours. We will, of course, have much more on that in just a moment. Well, elections across the United Kingdom have changed the political landscape of the country. The Liberal Democrats have been hammered at the ballot box. The party leader, the Deputy Prime Minister, Nick Clegg, said they've been blamed for the coalition's spending cuts.
In politics, as in life, sometimes you get these big ups and downs, and we have taken a real knock.
Well, the SNP win an unprecedented majority in the Scottish Parliament, paving the way for a future referendum on independence. Party leader Alex Salmond says he will be holding talks with the Westminster government.
The Prime Minister and laying down markers as to what this result, what this mandate means in terms of Scotland's relationship with the United Kingdom. So I welcome the declarations from the opposition parties about constructive opposition. Because although the SNP have a majority of the seats, we don't have a monopoly of wisdom.
Alex Salmond, well, the Conservative vote has held up well in England. The Prime Minister says he will fight against Scottish independence.
If they want to hold a referendum, I will campaign to keep our United Kingdom together with every single fibre that I have.
Well, Labour has made gains in England and most notably in Wales, though fall short of a clear majority. Party leader Ed Miliband said there was no room for complacency.
I know we've got further to go to rebuild trust and to win back support. But the most important thing about these elections is not about politicians, it's about people. And people have sent a very clear message to the Liberal Democrats and to the Conservative-led government about what they're doing. And they've said to Nick Clegg, you don't have permission to be supporting Conservative policies on tuition fees, the NHS, and indeed on the deficit.
Ed Miliband there. In other news, there's no evidence that failings by either the intelligence services or the emergency services contributed to the deaths of the victims of the London bombings. That is according to the coroner at the inquest into the attack, in which 52 people died nearly 6 years ago. Judge Heather Hallett did, however, make recommendations about how the response to any further acts of terrorism might be improved. This report from John Brain.
So, nearly 6 years after the carnage of the London bombings, some answers at last for those who survived and for the families of those who didn't. Inevitably, the inquest has confirmed that the 52 victims of 7/7 were unlawfully killed, but it limits the blame solely to the bombers themselves. The coroner, Lady Hallett, says the 5-month-long hearing does not justify the conclusion that any failings of any organisation or individual caused or contributed to the deaths. She said even if the response of the emergency services had been quicker, they wouldn't have been able to save any more lives. And although she expressed some criticism of the security agencies, she said they weren't responsible for the failure to prevent the atrocity. Already there have been calls for a further investigation.
The inquest verdict, having brought us to its heights, has only succeeded in bringing us back to the foothills of the challenges that lie ahead. These are challenges which only, for me, a public inquiry can address.
But at the end of what at times has been a harrowing 5 months for the families, there's also a sense of relief that this part of their ordeal is over. John Brain, BBC News.
Al-Qaeda has confirmed that Osama bin Laden has been killed. A message posted on militant websites warned of retaliation and said an audio message from their leader, made a week before he died, would be broadcast. It comes as new pictures have emerged of living conditions inside the compound where bin Laden was shot dead at the weekend. More from me a little later. Back now, though, to our coverage of the election results with David Dimbleby and his guests.
And let's go to Northern Ireland and join Chris Buckler in Belfast. You've had one or two results in now, the first results in from Northern Ireland, Chris.
Yes, indeed, they're starting to trickle in. It has been the last half hour that we've actually seen some progress. It's been a very long day in Northern Ireland, a very long day of verification and counting. It's a complicated system anyway, but of course, even though we get the first results, it doesn't mean we know everything about how the constituencies are going to lie, because we will have several different counts because this is the single transferable vote system. In the first results, Newry and Armagh, we saw Conor Murphy topping the poll. He is, of course, a Sinn Féin minister here, part of the executive, and it seems like Sinn Féin have had a pretty good day, actually, and they seem very confident when you talk to them. However, it doesn't seem like they have outdone the DUP. As a result, the Democratic Unionist Party likely to retain that position of First Minister. Peter Robinson will stay First Minister, and Sinn Féin almost certainly will stay as well Deputy First Minister Martin McGuinness. So no change effectively there. What will be a change, though, potentially, is the problems with the Ulster Unionist vote. Now, the Ulster Unionists, you might remember, a decade ago, really very much leading the pack. They were the #1 party in Northern Ireland, had the biggest share of the vote. They have now fallen to 4th place by the looks of things. That's what everybody is thinking. And that allows the SDLP to take one ministry away from them in this Northern Ireland executive, leaving them with just one. So the SDLP will have 2 ministries by the looks of things, and the Ulster Unionists will have 1. But as I mentioned, this is such a complicated system. The counting goes on for a long time. We've only had the first results. The reality is we won't have the full picture until sometime tomorrow afternoon, and some are saying even potentially tomorrow evening.
Tomorrow evening, Chris. I'm not sure we'll be with you. But,
yeah, it is a long process.
Okay, thanks very much. Well, I'm joined here now by the Secretary of State for Education, Michael Gove. What's your reaction to these results? Not the referendum we talked about now. You were rather in favour at one point, weren't you, of AV? It was a bit your...
Well, I was open-minded, and I wanted to have a look at the arguments either way before eventually coming to a conclusion. And in the end, I thought that it was better to stick with a system which the British people were familiar with, and which delivered clear and decisive results.
Did you flirt with AV for a bit?
No, I didn't flirt with AV, but I'll explain the process I went through, which may be of interest to you and to my mum, but not to many others.
There are millions out here waiting to hear your
I feel
on the point.
It was of such interest to the Yes campaign, they even initially put your name with them, only for it to be withdrawn when you said you hadn't decided yet.
I didn't think it's of much interest to anyone else. I'll tell you exactly what happened. I think the coalition has been a good thing. I've enjoyed working with colleagues in the Liberal Democrats. a number of them whom I respect said to me, if you believe that this is a good thing, then think about the alternative vote seriously. It's something that matters a great deal to us, and we believe that it is something that can help cement the coalition. Now, I looked at the case for the alternative vote, and I feel when you're thinking about your constitution, you can't just think about a specific set of circumstances and a specific arrangement for one time. You've got to think over generations and over elections, what's the best method? So I took some time to reflect on what the strengths and weaknesses of the case for change were, and I concluded for myself that the best thing to do was to vote no and to stick with the system. But I think in fairness to the point that Paddy and some of his colleagues will have made right at the beginning, if you are in a coalition and you enjoy working with people from another party, and they suggest that it's only fair that you examine the merits of a particular policy, then out of courtesy, I think it's right to do so.
But interestingly, you said that they said to you it will help cement the coalition if you come on side on this AV referendum. You didn't, and indeed it's been lost. So, by implication, the system, the coalition is a bit less secure. It's less cemented than it was before the referendum vote.
Well, one of the things that struck me, again, is the way in which my colleagues, Liberal Democrat colleagues, have reacted to the results during the course of today. And we saw Chris Huhne, who was very passionately in favour of change, and others respond with dignity and a sense of proportion. And I think that everyone recognises that the British people have given such a clear sense of what they think about the electorate system, that any further wrangling over that would be misplaced. And we now have an opportunity to make sure that the essential mission of the coalition, which is transforming our economy for the better and reforming our public services to make the country fairer, can proceed over the next 4 years.
How come they've got it wrong? Normally, politicians normally judge that I asked after the referendum. I remember probably the referendum on Europe, how Ross was very careful to wait until he thought he'd get a yes vote and praise the questions to get a yes vote. But this seems to sort of fly by the seat of their pants. In hindsight, I feel the way you vote.
Again, if you're in a coalition, you have your own view about what the union has to do. But they're a different party with a different tradition. Now, the things that motivate me, it's not primarily constitutional reform. The things that motivate me are issues like social mobility. And there are lots of Liberal Democrats who are driven by the same tradition with whom it's to work. But the reason why one of those individuals are Liberal Democrats is because they believe in constitutional and electoral reform. It matters to them, and in the interest of securing a strong government in the national interest, then one of the parts of the agreement that we conceded to the Liberal Democrats was a referendum. And it's not for me to say it's what in the interest of the Liberal Democrats, it's the Liberal Democrats must properly judge for themselves. And I respect their party, and I respect their right to be making these decisions as grown-ups.
Can I just say I agree for a moment? I don't know how to agree necessarily with this. I say so. I'm not as you but what I find is that you now have this reference. They have decided to go one way, and we're Democrats, and we accept that. So from those points, my constitutional faith is important for running our country. But the thing that really matters is like the brown budget, NHS, for education, and above all, resistance to our country back to the and in many ways, some of those people do our constitutional here. That's where we are, that's where the debate was matter.
Peter in this rules, you've been about the coalition. Mr. Burger, you've deleted your wife calling for a referendum on the impeachment. What do you think what's happened and the consequences of it for all the coalition? What do you like?
It's certainly not right to chat about the referendum. You obviously, which we care about, what the voting system people do care about. But it has been a really good thing for David Cameron because he put his authority on the line by having an AV referendum. He said he would lead the No campaign. He has, and it's a resounding success. And we're making council gains a year after we've come into power and made considerable public service cuts. So it's been a good day for David Cameron, but a pretty awful day for the Liberals.
And so what are the implications for the coalition? How should Cameron handle the Liberals now?
Well, we gave the Liberals what they wanted. They wanted this referendum. They've got it. They've had it. It's out the way. The British people have spoken. So now we get on with governing the country. And the only reason for the coalition, the only reason the two parties are together is to clear up the economic mess that Labour left. So once that's done, coalition should finish and we should move on. I think what these results really clearly indicate that there's very little chance of this coalition going 5 years.
Oh, really? Why do you think it's going to break?
Well, I just don't think that you can have two parties who have very different views there for 5 years when the problem that we're dealing with, which is the economy, should be solved by then. And if I was a Liberal activist, seeing thousands of my council colleagues losing and seeing the one thing I care about losing very heavily, I would have big question marks of whether the coalition is worth continuing.
What would you call the economy being solved? What point would you say, well, now we've done our job and we can kick the Liberals out?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there is any point in having a political system where you vote for parties and then when they get into power, they change their policies to come together unless there's a national emergency. There is a national emergency. George Osborne is dealing with it very well. And once that's cleared, maybe a year, 2 years' time, then I think the party should go their own way. And there's absolutely no reason why this government couldn't govern on a minority basis and force the other parties to call a general election if they dare.
Michael, I'll bring you in, Paddy. Michael, do you think there's sense in that?
Well, I'm a great fan of Peter's in many respects. He often talks common sense, but I disagree with him about the length of time that the coalition should exist. It's a 5-year deal, and I think that it would be mistaken to attempt to pull stumps early before we've had the full innings.
Paddy Ashton, what do you think of the idea that in 2 or 3 years' time the problem will be solved and that's the time to say goodbye?
Well, I certainly believe the problem and hope the problem will be solved in 2 or 3 years' time, but we have signed up for a 5-year fixed-term parliament, and we hope for that. I think, Mr. Bowden, if I may say so, your 2 earlier commentators from the Sun and the Mirror just so misunderstand and underestimate the nature of the Liberal Democrats. We didn't do this for electoral advantage. In fact, anybody who believed that going into this coalition would deliver huge electoral advantage to us was frankly naive. I didn't, and I don't think any of my colleagues did either. We did this for the national interest, and I'm proud that we did it. And yes, we've gone through some difficult times. I've been through those before. I remember 1989 when I lost as leader of the party every single seat and came fourth right across the face of Britain. But we're a party who believes in things, and at present we believe that working together with somebody else, not because we love them or agree with them on everything, but we agree with them on the main things that need to be done to this country in order to be able to put right the mess Labour left behind, we will stick to that. We have set our hand on that tiller, and we'll stick it through to the end. And anybody who believes that our party is going to duck and run at this stage simply misunderstands the party and its commitment to the national interest.
I think they've just had a flash of what's going to be a real problem for David Cameron. Yes, he's had a good night, but he has problems in 2 areas. The Lib Dems have had such a terrible time, there are going to be internal demands for them to be able to take more credit and to get more concessions, and there are going to be more voices emboldened by the last 24 hours, like Peter Bones, who didn't want to do this in the first place, who wanted a minority Conservative government, but who are going to say increasingly, probably increasingly loudly, why should we hang on with this? We could do it on our own.
How's the AV referendum going? We wanted 9,873,000 as the target to say that the No campaign had won, and they've now just crossed the 9 million mark, and Jeremy Vine has the actual figures as they stand at the moment. Jeremy, can you give us those and bring us up to date?
Yes, I will bring you up to date. Let's have a look at our map. We're searching out for some little pockets of white. The black is where people have said no. The white is where they've said yes. Grey is still counting. So you can see Glasgow Kelvin, which we mentioned earlier. There we go, which is just a small amount of white there. And Cambridge down here voted yes. Another tiny speck of white. There's really not very much at all. There's this cluster of London boroughs then, Southwark and Camden and Islington and Haringey, who are white as well. But apart from that, it's overwhelmingly no. And we're now looking at a situation where imminently the no's will cross the line and have won decisively. Let's have a look at the figures here. 42% turnout. And the winning line, you can see we put at 9.873 million. 9.873 million. And you see how close the no's are. Let's just get a close-up of that. The no's very, very close to that win line. They might even go over it while I'm speaking. So very close to winning, according to our projections. Is going to be going way through it, and a very, very resounding win for them. If I show you the percentages now, let's just have a look at this. Here we go. So you can see, extraordinary, isn't it? These are the actual votes counted, 68%, more than double the yes votes, 68% for the no's. Let me just show you some of the regions as well. I'll let you know as soon as I hear if it's gone through and the matter is finally settled. So first of all, we have the northeast of England here. Just take a look at this, and you can see 38% turnout. We're showing you this one because the no's here are 72%. So that's the highest in England, 72%, and the yes is on 28 in the northeast of England. One more region for you. Let's have a look, and we'll show you London, where they've been voting only on AV because no council elections here. London, 35% turnout. And this has got the lowest no. We heard about those 4 boroughs which actually voted yes. You can see 61%. That's the lowest no we can find in England at the moment. Or anyway, 61% and 39% yes it is. So we're right close to the win line now for the no campaign. They're above 9 million. The win line is 9.873 million. And they're going to go through it, I think, David, just in the next few minutes.
Thanks, Jeremy. Let's join the BBC's political editor, Nick Robinson, who's out on the greens with us last night. What's the news this evening, Nick?
Well, the news is that David Cameron can scarcely believe his luck. If it weren't for the diktat that has gone out from Downing Street that there ought to be no crowing, I think you might well see the Prime Minister dance down the street. Not only has he seen off the no campaign, seen off the yes campaign, he's also got gains in terms of councils and councillors. I think the intriguing thing there tonight is to wonder what the consequence of that is. Nick Clegg is now under extreme pressure from within his party to show that he is delivering in this coalition. There is talk of fighting their word within the coalition. There is the talk from him of not having a return to Thatcherism. He will now have to show to his party and to the electorate that he is delivering real change within the coalition, or he'll come under even greater electoral pressure and indeed a threat from within his own party. And David Cameron may therefore pause to think tonight of that old Chinese proverb, be careful what you wish for.
Thank you very much, Nick. Michael Gove, what do you think of that analysis?
Well, I have great respect for Nick, but I think that throughout the day, people have missed the most important story, which is the Labour Party's failure to move forward. The really striking thing about these elections is that we anticipated that it would be really tough for the governing parties, for both the Liberal Democrats and for the Conservatives. Nick Clegg was braced for a tough night, and he was gracious enough to acknowledge that it had been a tough night. What nobody expected was that Labour would perform so miserably, that they would be gubbed in Scotland. 10 points ahead at the beginning of the campaign. Ed Miliband and Ed Balls go up there. They end up losing seats and falling behind the SNP. In those seats where they should be making progress, in the south of England, in Swindon, in Reading, in Dover, in Dartford, we find that the Conservatives are either holding their own or taking Labour seats. It's remarkable that on the radio this morning, Andy Burnham, the Labour election coordinator, should be seeking to compare his performance today with William Hague's in 1998. The true story of today, which will be written about and reflected on next week and thereafter, is the failure of the principal party of opposition to make any real progress at a time when the two governing parties are taking such difficult decisions in the national interest.
Well, everybody, of course, has their true story in politics and writes it their way.
Labour, what's striking,
wait a minute.
what's striking is how little attention the BBC have given to the story.
On the contrary, Labour have got 790 seats. Labour in Wales have taken 30 seats in the Assembly and are going to be able to govern on their own. And we have never ceased talking about Labour being totally destroyed in Scotland. I don't know what you've been watching. Maybe it was ITV.
Well, but the strike is the story, David, that with respect, your producers have failed to tell, is the fact that Labour have failed to make any decisive breakthrough. Let's be clear about this. We're 1 year in. The government are taking immensely difficult decisions. An austerity package, which everyone has been covering in great detail, in some cases remarkably, remarkable relish has been showed by some commentators in covering what the government is doing in anticipation of the government paying the price. But the Labour Party haven't made any progress before. Haven't made any progress tonight or today, which you can talk about. Well, how is it that in a seat like Dartford, a critical marginal, Labour can lose seats to the Conservatives, and that's merely dismissed as a footnote to what is the big story, which is allegedly the difficulties that Liberal Democrats have? You know, you concentrate on finding a few Liberal Democrat councillors at a moment of maximum grief and distress when they've just lost their seat, and try to force them to say something critical of Nick Clegg, when we know that the majority of Liberal Democrats recognise what was going to happen tonight, but no proper analysis of the difficulty that the Labour Party faces.
Michael, concentrate on Labour. Spare me your sympathy, please.
Well, I'm trying to be objective.
And I think he makes a fair point. Look, you're right, David. Everybody has their own gloss to put on things. But there is a fundamental fact at the heart here, and that is, if Labour is to have any chance of becoming the government, on the first year in, with major cuts introduced, they have to make more progress than this. Now that, you know, whichever way you gloss it, they may have done well here and there and so on, I accept that. But that is a basic fact. They cannot win from this position.
Peter Hain is not here now because Bernard Bogdan is here, and I can't ask him to speak for Labour, but I care neither one way or the other. Labour got 26 councils. They've got 790 councillors, which is not bad. And they've taken control of Wales. You really can't say that this has been a disastrous night.
I can, and I will.
Well, of course you will.
Yes.
But you may not be telling
Well, what's the share of the vote? Does Labour have much of a lead over the Conservatives in the national share of the vote?
We're joined by Jack Straw from Blackburn. He'll fill you in. Jack.
Look, this was a good, not a spectacular night for Labour. It wasn't bad for the Conservatives, and it was very poor for the Liberal Democrats. It was very poor indeed for us in Scotland. So far as England is concerned, the truth is in the northwest, for example, we did extremely well, including in some key marginal areas like Blackpool and Bury and Rossendale, places like that. I've just caught the end of that conversation with Michael Gove about the fact we haven't got Dartford. And Michael, I've been in your position. I mean, the truth is, yes, of course, we're making progress differentially in different areas, and we would have liked to have got Dartford, but we picked up Thanet Council, for example, in Kent. And in terms of the overall share of the vote, I mean, I think the Conservatives, as I said, haven't done badly for a first year of the government. But our share of the vote is up 10 percentage points on last year. So I think it's extremely difficult in England to argue that this was a poor night and some kind of crisis. I mean, that's obvious nonsense. Yes, I accept the fact that we have to make progress, especially in the south, and the southeast and the southwest, which is a key battleground. We're gradually building it up there, but there's more to do.
Michael Gove, do you want to answer?
Well, I was going to say I've been in Jack's position as well. I mean, I've been an opposition spokesman attempting to put a gloss on the failure of my party to move forward. I mean, Jack is a doughty old campaigner, but the truth is in Bury, which is a seat where Labour should have been doing amazingly well, I think they just took control of the council by pulling a straw in Trafford, where the Conservatives were expected to move backwards. In fact, we held our own. In places like Doncaster and Barnsley, Conservatives were re-elected. The truth is that the only places where Labour really moved forward are places like Liverpool, Manchester, Newcastle, Hull. Now, none of them really count as the sorts of commuter belt marginal seats on which Tony Blair built his election victory. And the truth that Jack knows is that the Labour Party made an historic mistake when it chose Ed Miliband as its leader, and it's now, I suspect, ruining the day that it's pursuing an electoral strategy which is entirely negative and not constructive, based on a critique of cuts and no alternative economic proposals, and that the Labour Party has abandoned the case for reform which it made its own when in government. And Jack is, he's an old hand, and I suspect that he's probably reflecting on the Labour Party's failure to learn all the lessons that Tony Blair had to din into their skulls throughout the 1990s.
Werner Bugnall, you want to come in? And Margaret Beckett, we can see you there. We'll come to you in just a moment.
Well, I wanted to resolve this squabble between the politicians, really, because I think the truth is in England and Wales...
On your own head be it, is all I say.
Well, I think the truth is in England and Wales we've become a geographically polarised country, and that Labour has done well in the north of England and in Wales in its traditional areas, broadly speaking. The Conservatives have done well in the south, and in that binary bipolar system, there seems no place for the Liberal Democrats. People are saying either we rather like the government, in which case we'll vote Conservative, or they're saying we don't like the government, in which case we'll vote Labour. So the two-party system has been reasserting itself. Scotland has gone its own way. It's a separate political system now, and the trends there are quite different from those in the rest of the country.
Margaret Beckett, let me bring you in.
I so disagree with
Margaret
that.
Beckett, you were for the No campaign. You must be very pleased by the reaction to that. I see we're on 9,612,000 now, and it's got to go to 873,000 for victory. What's your reaction to that, and what's your reaction to the attack on Labour for not having really cut the mustard in the way it should 1 year in with all these cuts from the election last year?
Well, I'm personally absolutely delighted by what seems to be the outcome of the referendum. I feel that all my life, not just all my political life, I've been listening to people in and around the Liberal Democrats claiming that the British people were clamouring for a change in our voting system. I've never believed it, but the British people haven't had a chance to make their voice heard, and it seems as if now they have. With regard to all this guff that we're getting from Michael Gove, well, I'm extremely encouraged, genuinely, by all the local election results today. I've been looking at quite a lot of the detail. I'm not surprised that we haven't, sorry, of course, but not surprised that we haven't done much better, because yes, we're a year in, and as Michael Gove says, there's been a lot of talk about tough decisions, and a lot of them haven't actually yet had an effect. So it's quite likely, first of all, people did elect, or just about, give the opportunity to govern to a combination of the Tories and the Liberal Democrats a year ago. People don't like turning round and saying, oh, we got that completely wrong. Probably one of the reasons why they gave the Liberal Democrats such a kicking is that that's a relatively problem-free way of doing it. But there are a lot of people who voted Tory, who think they did probably the right thing, and who haven't yet been hit by the impact of the changes the government's made.
We should just mark the point while you were speaking that just after 20 to 8, the alternative vote referendum was lost. They went past the 9,800,000 or so point. It's now 10 million again. So we can formally say it's something that we've known about ever since the voting started, indeed that the opinion polls were showing long back that this idea has been pretty well trounced. And Jack Straw, you were in favour of it. Are you dismayed by this? Sadly, I can't hear you, but maybe...
Sorry.
Try again.
I'm not dismayed. I think that the No campaign in the end ran a more effective campaign than the Yes campaign. One of the striking things for me, talking to bright young people on the streets who are actually working for the Labour Party last night here in Blackburn, was that their position on electoral reform, which previously had been fairly much in the middle, hardened very strongly against AV and in favour of first past the post. What I'm pleased about, since I was the person who moved the original legislation for a referendum, and here I agree entirely with Margaret, is that we have now had a situation where the people have spoken, and they've spoken comprehensively one way or another. They've spoken emphatically in favour of first past the post. And what we needed, and the idea of an AV referendum came off the back of the terrible meltdown in confidence in British politics because of the expenses scandal. We needed to, and the British people needed to decide to say whether they wanted the existing system or a significant change. They've decided emphatically in favour of the existing system, and that now gives it legitimacy. One of the problems the AV campaign faced was that, frankly, a shift by the Liberal Democrats, because when I put it forward in the House of Commons 15 months ago in favour of AV, and I've written and talked in favour of AV, but I've always been against proportional representation, they poured scorn on it and said what they wanted was proportional representation. They were latter-day converts, and actually not very effective latter-day converts, in favour of AV, and I think that's another reason why the referendum failed.
Margaret Beckett, do you think Ed Miliband will be damaged by having backed the wrong horse on this issue?
No, not at all. And one of the things that I'm really very proud of is that it was very clear all the way through that in the Labour Party there were genuine and strong differences of view, but we have respected each other's points of view, and there haven't been attacks by Labour politicians on each other for coming to a different judgment about it. And Ed made it plain from the beginning that as far as he was concerned, the local elections were the key, that he personally did feel that there was merit in a move towards AV, but that there was no question that people who did not agree would be absolutely free to put their point of view. So I think he's played a very honourable role, a very straightforward role. He's actually been more prominent in putting forward that point of view than perhaps some people would have liked. But all credit to him. He's spoken up for what he wanted, but he's been clear that the people will decide, and they have.
We have 10 minutes or so to go before the end of this Vote 2011 programme. So let's just go to Jeremy Vine first and have a summary from him, perhaps, of what's happened. Jeremy, can we?
Yes, let's look at the map here, and just overwhelming sense of the no in this referendum on the alternative vote. And I'll show you, just as you say, about just after 20 to 8, the winning line was crossed. 42% turnout meant you had to get to win 9.783 million. Let's have a look at this, and the no have gone through it substantially. Miles ahead of the yes is 10,155,018, and that number's still rising. These aren't the final figures. We're just giving you the moment the threshold was crossed. So that's it. The no's have it, and the AV referendum has been lost by the yes campaign. And just one more thing about the map here, really, below me. We're still searching for those bits of white, those places where the yeses are in a majority, and they're very, very hard to find. You can see not much going on as far as the yes campaign is concerned. There's Cambridge, and there's a couple of boroughs, 4 boroughs of London, which have voted as a majority for yes, but this is a thumping victory for the no's.
Thanks very much, Jeremy. Let's go to the whole election and just have a reminder of that. Emily, can we?
We haven't had a look at Scotland for a while. I'm just going to remind you what happened here. This was the most dramatic story of the night. These extraordinary gains here for the SNP. You can see, looking at the map, how much of Scotland they have painted that solid yellow now. The Lib Dems pushed out right to the islands, to Orkney and Shetland up there. Labour losing a lot here, and the Lib Dems of Edinburgh as well. That's the first time we've seen the SNP gain any seats in Edinburgh. But as you can see, that's a comprehensive victory, particularly for Alex Salmond. They've gone above and beyond that mark that many thought would be impossible before this time. 65 was the number they needed for that overall majority, and they have beaten that. They've got almost double the score that Labour has there. Let's just have a look at Wales, where Labour has actually fared much better. Here they have got what is a workable majority. 30 is the minimum number that they needed to actually get that majority. They can now govern on their own if they choose not to go back into coalition with either Plaid. They might talk about some kind of working relationship with the Lib Dems. That's yet to be discussed. Carwyn Jones is not giving much away when we heard from him. But interesting to see the Conservatives then in second place. Plaid Cymru, that minor party in the coalition, being pushed down. They have made losses of 4 on the night. And what about the English councils? Look at that scoreboard at the end of the night. This is a story that could be forgotten once we're talking about the AV referendum, and certainly the change of picture in Scotland. But the Conservatives, who at one point were expected to lose up to, 900 councillors, some thought, have actually made gains on the night. Labour have made gains of 25. They're not that substantial, not possibly as rich or as solid as they might have liked. The Lib Dems, who started with just 19 councils, have got 9, but they've lost half of those. That's been a pretty bad night for the Lib Dems here. If I show you what that means in terms of the councillors, this is the number. Extraordinary to see the Conservatives actually adding on that number, 78. Labour then, 790. Don't forget the Conservatives adding on from 2007, which was a pretty solid year for them. Labour were at their bedrock of support, really, from last time round. They have made some gains, not that magnificent, and the Lib Dems here down 690. Look at the hit that the Lib Dems have taken, if you like, at the shield, some are saying, for their coalition partners, the Conservatives there.
Thanks very much, Emily. And John Curtis down in the engine room, which all these figures come from. John, what is your final view of all the figures we've had through? What is it you want to draw our attention to?
Well, I think that's one of the reasons why you've had quite a dispute, particularly between your Conservative and Labour spokesmen this evening. is that truth is that there is something in these elections for both of them to take away. The Labour Party, certainly by getting up to around 37% in our projected national share, pretty consistently across the country, doing about 10% better than they did in the local elections at the same time as the general election last year, certainly demonstrated, as they did in the Barnsley and Oldham by-elections, that they're politically competitive once more, and that certainly in the context of a mid-term election can gain ground vis-à-vis the Conservatives. Equally, however, I would also accept, and I think the Labour Party seems to accept, that this is not the kind of performance that necessarily demonstrates the Labour Party would be able to win a general election tomorrow. And indeed, it is certainly true that Labour's advance is stronger in wards in the north of England, in working class areas, in places with high unemployment, i.e. it's much more traditional Labour territory than in middle England, though there is in truth some progress everywhere. Equally, the Conservatives are quite right to point out that this performance 1 year into government is quite a creditable one. In truth, their share of the vote seems to be pretty much in line with what they got in the local elections, again 12 months ago. And of course, they have managed to come away with slightly more councillors than they had at the beginning of the night. The truth, of course, is the reason why both of them can come away with a fair degree of pleasure about this result is that the one party that's really suffered are the Liberal Democrats.
John, thank you very much. So there you are. You're all right. But you're not entirely right. But you're right, and Labour's right.
Are we allowed
to
to comment briefly on that?
On John Curtis?
Yeah, I mean, look, the Lib Dems have had a phenomenal, 20 years of growth and growth and growth. And yeah, I've enjoyed coming on your programmes and marking our growth forward over that time. We've had a bad night, of course we have. They occur once in a while in politics, but the idea that the Liberal Democrats are over and finished is wrong, and the idea that we're going to abandon the task we set ourselves to work with others to put right the crisis of this country created by Labour is also wrong.
I don't think anybody said you were over and finished, certainly not John Curtis.
No, but I mean, well, okay. The idea that parties don't from time to time, after a long run of success, have to take a bad night. The question of it is not, is it easy to be up when you're up? Of course it is. But the real difficult thing is to stick with it when you're down. Right. And Laura, that's what we'll do.
Well, actually, it's all about the consequences and the conundrums for each party in turn. And in a sense, although the Conservatives have had a very good night, they have some problems too. Cameron's, potentially, his big issue is how to prop up Nick Clegg. He wants the coalition to go on. That's quite clear today. But yet we've already heard tonight some of his backbenchers, some senior MPs are going to be urging him more and more to dissociate from the Liberal Democrats, perhaps even to ditch them. Some like Peter Bone saying already it should not go the last 5 years. But at the same time, the Liberal Democrats do need more, in many people's view, to be able to take credit for successes they think they've had, and also perhaps on issues like the NHS or like Lord's reform to be able to get more of what they want. And how also to rebuild that trust in the Cabinet. This afternoon, after a rough and tumble campaign, we had Chris Huhne in this studio sitting next to Francis Maude, accusing him of trashing him, saying that the Conservatives have lost sight of the big strategy. That is going to be very difficult. For the Liberal Democrats, it's pretty much awful everywhere, but significantly, nobody is yet, apart from a few noises off in local government, are calling for Nick Clegg to go. And that is something that he will be relieved about. But the things like Lord's reform, you have to wonder if they will really get Lib Dems back on track. And what about his cabinet colleagues, people like Vince Cable and Chris Huhne, who have almost become semi-detached. But I think there are just briefly some very important points to make about Labour. This has been a stuttering day of progress. They've done okay in English local government, but they were hoping for 1,000 councils. They haven't got there. Dreadful result in Scotland. Decent result in Wales, but also Ed Miliband's high-profile association with the AV campaign also adds to his woes. And I think, in the words of one former senior Labour figure who said to me today, Ed Miliband is not wounded by the last 24 hours, but it may well be that he has been weakened. And in a way, the most dangerous thing for Labour right now is that they continue to drift on. Things aren't so bad that anybody's going to be talking about big change or getting rid of Ed Miliband, but they're not yet showing signs of things really coming good again.
Jack Straw, you'll have heard that Ed Miliband has been weakened by these results, that the results on the ground are not as good as they should be, and the failure of the referendum is bad for him too. What's your reaction to that? Briefly, if you would, because we're coming to the end of our time.
I don't think Ed Miliband's been weakened by this. I certainly accept the implication of Laura's point that there is absolutely no grounds for complacency in these results. We've done pretty well in many areas. We've got to do better in some. We've certainly got to see a big inquest in Scotland, where the results were obviously comprehensively poor. Last point is just on Paddy, who's being very Pollyannaish. This was not just a bad night for the Liberal Democrats, it was a very poor night, and the truth is that what we're seeing, and we're going to see, is a resumption of what Vernon Bognador called two-party politics. And the AV referendum, seen as a key part of the coalition agreement to prop up the Liberal Democrats, is actually the thing that is going to reinforce the return to two-party politics.
Michael Gove.
Ed Miliband has been weakened. He's done less well now than Jim Callaghan and Michael Foot did in 1980 and 1981 against Margaret Thatcher. That's the real measurement of how poor Labour's performance has been. And that is the big, unexpected and momentous story of the local elections.
Okay.
I think Laura is absolutely right to say that the outcome of the elections and the referendum will put pressure on the coalition, both from the Conservative right, but I suspect also from the Liberal Democrat grassroots. And I think it does illustrate a fundamental dilemma for Liberal Democrats of how to preserve their identity when in coalition with another party, and for that they do need some sort of exit strategy for the coalition. This was a point David Steele made very strongly, Paddy's predecessor as Liberal Democrat leader. They have to leave the coalition before the general election if they are not to be seen simply as a shield for the Conservatives and take the sort of flack they have had.
I think you're right there. You have to go into the next election entirely independent. I agree with that. And I think I would. The point that would make me part company with my leader is if he ever sacrificed that, which he will not do. But there's a role to play, and we intend to play it. And by the way, I think your idea that 30 years of progress away from two-party politics has been overturned in a night. I mean, I can understand why Jack will wish for that, but really, Vernon, you and I are old friends. To say that 30 years of a movement in British politics is changed by a single night is pushing it a little, I think.
All right. Well, English politics is changed by one thing, which is the no vote in the referendum on the alternative vote. The figures are there at the bottom of the screen. The no vote running at 10.5 million, just a bit more. The yes at 4 and a bit. And it's still rolling on until we get all those figures in, which will happen for a bit. I think from all of us here who've been covering Vote 2011, that about wraps it up. Emily Maitlis there with all her great charts. Emily, thank you very much. It's been very interesting and revealing watching it. And Jeremy Vine, wherever you are, sometimes in the House of Commons, sometimes astride the map of the UK. I don't know. Anyway, there's the figure beside him on the right and the formidable statues behind showing the result of the referendum. So, from the election team, Jeremy Vine, Emily Maitlis, Laura Kunsberg here, Nick Robinson, who was with us, and indeed with thanks to all the politicians who came and took part. From all of us here on Vote 2011, good evening.